Hey everybody, I am standing in my living room. It is pouring down rain outside. What a shift from the gorgeous day that we had on Thursday. But here are announcements for this week. First of all, there is going to be live worship with the message anytime that you're watching it on Sunday, May 31st. You can go to www.brookviewchurch.com, and when you click on messages, you will see a screen like this. And click on this bottom part here, and that will take you directly to that link. So hopefully you can go there now if you started this out on YouTube, because the worship won't be on YouTube. Also, as many of you are probably already aware, guidelines for churches gathering together were changed this week by Governor Inslee. In the current phase that we're in, as of right now, we are allowed to gather 100 people or less in a socially distant way outdoors. And then in the next phase, phase 2, and as of today, we don't know when that date will be, we can gather at 25% of our building's capacity or our sanctuary's capacity in a socially distant way, which would mean that about 35 people total could be at church together in person based on the size of our space. Now, when we shared about what church might look like when it opens up at our Ignite gathering a couple of weeks ago through Zoom, we all acknowledged the reality that we have a broad range of comfort levels and circumstances that are represented in our church and by all of you. And that if we're gonna hold in-person gatherings, it would require being really gracious with each other and doing everything that we can as individuals to protect the spirit of unity that has been such a foundational quality among us. With that said, we have put together a confidential survey that we would be so thankful if you took the time to fill out so that we can get an understanding of how you're feeling and how we might best serve each other when we are together again. Now, we know that we won't be able to accommodate all of what I'm imagining are diverse feelings and comfort levels that each of you might have, but we are committed to listening, to researching best practices, and coming up with the best plan that we can moving forward. In addition to that, we're committed to communicating with you as clearly as we can what church reopening will look like so that you know what to expect and you can make the best choice for your particular family. I'll also add that we will continue to have messages online just like we've been doing for those of you that wouldn't be comfortable with an in-person gathering for quite some time. So, to prepare for that, we're asking that everyone who is able would go to brookviewchurch.com, and on the home page of our website, you will, it's upside down, you'll see this. And right down at the bottom, it says Church Reopening Survey. And we would just love it if you would take a minute to go there and fill that out so that we can get the most information to work off of in our particular arena as we work to serve you. If for some reason you aren't able to access that survey, we would love to have you reach out to us and we will make sure that we get a link to you. The very last announcement that I have is I just want to say thank you to everyone who signed up to help with Vision House's Adopt a Room. As of this week, our wish list and our online registry for furnishing 2 kids' bedrooms has been fully donated by all of you. In addition to that, we have all of the volunteers that we need for our move-in day that will hopefully be scheduled sometime at the end of June. I know that if we were gathering in person, you would erupt in spontaneous cheers and clapping. So I'm just gonna kind of envision that right now and bask in the reality of what a generous and thoughtful church body I get to be a part of. The way that you love often takes my breath away, and I'm just so proud to get to be a part of this community. I want to end by encouraging all of you to fill out the online communication card at brookviewchurch.com. Click on contact, and then you'll see a link to that communication card. We love hearing from you, and we would love to respond to any questions or thoughts that you have today. Have a great week. We'll see you next week online.
All right, so we have been making our way for many weeks through the most complete and most famous sermon of Jesus, what's now called the Sermon on the Mount. And the best way to describe this sermon of Jesus is this, that it is his vision for a whole new way to be human. Now, the plan was for us, for Casey and I, to sort of work through his Sermon on the Mount, line by line, verse by verse, passage by passage. And then the COVID pandemic hit, and our world was thrown into chaos. And so he and I started bouncing around a little bit. We looked for what we felt like were the most relevant parts of the Sermon on the Mount, and we kind of would focus on those week to week, which meant we kind of got out of order. So we chose the most relevant stuff. Now we're hitting the other stuff, but this is still going to be awesome. We only have a few weeks left, but today we are really jumping backward toward the beginning. And before I read today's passage, I want to warn you, this might be unsettling for you. This might be really unsettling for you. This is Jesus on sexuality and on marriage. Here we go. Jesus says, "You have heard that it was said, 'You shall not commit adultery.' But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to go into hell. It has been said, anyone who divorces his wife must give her a certificate of divorce. But I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife except for sexual immorality makes her the victim of adultery, and anyone who marries a divorced woman commits adultery." Now, nothing controversial in there at all, right? I will tell you this. I think this is a beautiful and profound teaching. But we have to understand what Jesus is saying and what Jesus is not saying. And so I have my work cut out for me on this one. But let me dive in with this. My in-laws are very big on fishing. So Jen's dad and her dad's brothers, big, huge outdoorsy fishermen guys, because their dad, Jen's grandpa, was an avid outdoorsman. And Jen's dad says that his dad was the best fisherman he ever saw. In fact, he says, "My dad was the best fisherman in all of Whatcom County." And I don't know how you quantify that. But one day, Jen's dad was talking about his dad's fishing prowess. And so I just asked, I said, "Well, what was his secret? Like, what made him so good?" And Jen's dad got this huge smile, and he just shook his head, and he said, "Oh, man, he could just think like a fish." Now, I'm told that fish aren't really very complex creatures. To a fish, Life is about the maximum gratification of appetite at the minimum expenditure of energy. So to a fish, life is see the food, want the food, eat the food, and that's about it. A rainbow trout never really reflects on where his life is headed. A girl steelhead rarely says to a boy steelhead, I don't feel like you're as committed to our relationship as I am. I wonder, do you really love me for me, or is it just for my body? I mean, fish don't usually say stuff like that. They're mostly just a collection of appetites. A fish is a stomach, a mouth, and a pair of eyes. Fish are not known to be brilliant. A lot of times we talk about clever animals, right? We talk about clever animals. We talk about like foxes or raccoons or elephants. But fish aren't usually grouped in on that. So if someone says like, hey, you are as smart as a fish, that's probably not a good thing. Think about how dumb fish are, really. It's kind of amazing. And when you think about it, it's amazing because the same tactics for catching fish, they keep working year after year after year. Hey, fish, swallow this. It's not the real thing. It's just a lure. You think it'll feed you and you think it'll satisfy you, but it won't. What's worse is it'll trap you. If you were to look closely, fish, you'd see that it's wrapped around a hook and connected to a line. So if you bite, it's just a matter of time before your enemy reels you in. But fish never seem to figure this out. You'd think that fish would learn from all their fish friends who went for a lure before them and then went like flying off into space, never to return. They fall for the bait and hook thing over and over and over. Aren't you guys glad that people are so much smarter than that? Yes. Or maybe they're not. A brilliant man with the desire to change the world goes into politics. And he has the backing and potential to do immeasurable good until it becomes known that he's been sleeping with prostitutes. His career is over. His family is blown apart. His kids never look at him the same. And all the good that could have been will never be. A young girl wants to be popular, wants to be liked by the boys. So she decides to get real friendly with them, several of them. And pretty soon, names are being whispered about her. The girls don't really want to be her friend anymore. The boys do, but only for one reason. Her strategy doesn't lead where she thought it would. A husband with a sexual addiction lives for years in secret guilt. He feels like he can never be close to God. He feels like he can never really be fully known by his wife. A wife goes through a dry time in her marriage, and it's repairable until she gets hooked in an emotional attachment with another man, which eventually blows up everything, and on and on and on. It turns out some people actually have a problem. Some people actually have a problem. Aren't you guys glad that you and I don't? Aren't you glad that we're all like strong, healthy, sane, normal people? Well, in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus kind of digs at this, I'm sure glad I don't have a problem kind of thinking. We tend to think of his sermon as like this deeply spiritual talk, right? Like, blessed are the poor in spirit, and blessed are the meek, and you are the salt of the earth, and you are the light of the world. And it is that, and it is beautiful, and it is deeply spiritual, but it is also very earthy, very practical. Jesus addresses everyday issues of ordinary life. And very early on in his talk, Jesus says, all right, we're talking about life in the kingdom, we're talking about life with God, let's talk about sex. And the real question he's getting at here is, who's got issues when it comes to sexuality? And here's what Jesus says. He says, you have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. So Jesus starts with this common line that he uses all throughout the Sermon on the Mount. You've heard it said, quoting something from the Old Testament or something that was common in their culture. He says, you've heard it said, do not commit adultery. This is a reference to one of the 10 commandments. And it very literally means, if you are married, don't have sex with someone other than your spouse. Because adultery leads to wreckage and pain, and it is wrong, and it always violates God's will. And some of you here, and some of you, you know that pain. You've been through that pain. But Jesus noticed that some people, like the Pharisees, the religious leaders that were listening, thought that if they had never committed adultery, then they were perfectly righteous on the sexuality front. And so they'd get kind of smug, they'd get kind of superior, but they were still broken, as we all are. And their brokenness was affecting their sexuality, as it always does. And they still needed God's grace, as we all do. And Jesus wants to get to the heart of this. He wants to dig beneath the surface of outward behavior. And so he illustrates this by talking about how even these guys who thought they were all good were still capable of giving what might be called the look. You ever been in a restaurant and there's a husband and a wife at a table, and then an attractive waitress walks by, and the husband starts staring at her. Can't take his eyes off of her. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? Yeah, none of us have experienced this ourselves, but we have seen other people do this kind of thing. The husband is not thinking of this other woman as a person at this point, as somebody's mom or somebody's sister or somebody's daughter, as a person who uniquely bears the image of God. She's just body parts. He's just using her. He's watching her to get that little surge of gratification. He's giving her what we might call the look. He thinks nobody notices, but way more often than he realizes, his wife knows. And every time she watches him do it, she feels devalued and threatened and disrespected. So Jesus says, look, that's not the heart of God for relationships or for sexuality. Here's the deal. Sexual purity and faithfulness goes way, way beyond adultery avoidance. Some of you who think of yourselves as sexually righteous engage all throughout the day in what could be called the look. Now, a quick word on this. Jesus is absolutely not saying that it is a sin to notice that somebody's attractive. We have been created male and female as sexual beings. The sense of attraction or sizzle or chemistry or sexual desire has actually been hardwired into us by God, and it's a good thing. So, question. At what age do you get beyond noticing attractive people? Yeah, when you die. Okay? Attraction is a part of what it is to be human. And that's a really good thing. Jesus isn't talking about that. There's a critical distinction we need to make, because people think, they look at this teaching and they're like, oh man, Jesus is saying that I'm not supposed to have any sense of attraction or sexual desire. And to be honest with you, I could never do that. In fact, I wouldn't even want to do that. Jesus is talking about looking at another person with the express intent of lusting. In other words, an element of will has to come into the look. It's allowing the mind to dwell on it and kind of like wallow there. And of course, this can be done by women every bit as much as men. But see, Jesus' concern here is not just adultery. It's not even just adultery and the look. His concern is human flourishing in every realm of life, and that absolutely includes sexuality. And Jesus' point is that there's sexual brokenness and therefore sexual problems in everybody, and so we all need God's help. We all need God's help. There are so many ways broken sexuality can manifest itself. And you think about, obviously there's the problem of the look, which can become so habitual that we aren't even aware that we're doing it. Or there's the problem of the treatment of people who don't attract the look, right? People who constantly get overlooked. And there's all kinds of research out there on this now. People who don't get hired. People who don't get promoted as quickly, people who don't get raises as quickly or get recognized because they just don't fit the cultural stereotype of what it is to be attractive. There's the problem of judgmentalism and spiritual superiority, a refusal to love and extend grace to people because they've had sexual issues, to think, you know what, I'm better than all those like sexual sinners over there. There's the problem of allowing my whole identity to be based on my ability to attract the look. And it drives my image of who I am. In fact, my entire identity. Then there's the problem of millions of hours and dollars devoted to porn and the women and the men who participate that being crushed on a spiritual level. There's the problem of sexual frustration in marriage. There's the problem of parents refusing to talk openly with their kids about sexuality because it's become a taboo topic. There's the problem of sexual harassment. There's the problem of people who appear in control on the surface but carry deep sexual regrets or hurts or histories or addictions that are even heavier because they carry them in secret and they carry them all alone. Now, why bring all this up? I mean, I'm sure that all of you are super uplifted in this moment. Why bring all this up? To simply point out God's heart is broken over the current state of human sexuality. It is a big, fat, huge mess in our world. So who's got issues? Who's got issues when it comes to sexuality? Brooke, do we have the next slide? There we go. We all do. We all do. We all do. We've all been a victim to some degree. And if we can be honest, we've all contributed to the problem to some degree. Look, if everybody in this room wrestling with mismanaged sexuality suddenly vanished, I would be speaking to an empty room. I say that like I would still be here. I would not still be here. So can we just recognize that? Okay, let me talk specifically about this to single guys for a second. And you go, well, why guys and not women? Because I'm a guy and I get guys. And being a single guy, like apprenticing to Jesus, can be really, really difficult. Like the issue of lust is a big deal. And I remember when I was a college student and I was up at Western, there was this huge posse of all of us single guys trying to figure out how to follow Jesus and guys trying to honor God with our sexuality and honor the women around us. And toward the end of my time at Western, some of those single guys started to get married. And so I went to a lot of weddings, including my own. And it was really funny because the guys that continued to be single, they would be afraid to go visit their married friends unannounced. And the reason for that fear was hilarious to me. And it's because these guys imagine that married couples just sit around naked all the time. They had this like vision of marriage as fantasy land. Now, God is certainly in favor of full sexual expression and of exploration and sensuality and enjoyment. But what some of my single friends fail to realize is that life actually gets complicated. Like work happens. You can't just have sex all day. Work happens. And tiredness happens. And stress happens. Like even when you're married, headaches happen. Sometimes they actually do happen. Kids happen. 2 or 3 preschoolers, toddlers can happen. And all of a sudden, it doesn't feel so much like Fantasyland. Sometimes it feels like Tomorrowland. Sometimes it feels like Never Never Land. But a lot of the single guys were basically thinking, okay, this is a problem, but it's coming to an end soon because right now I'm like a raging bull of hormones with no outlet. So I've got some issues with lust, but once I get married and I start living in Fantasyland, it's all going to be a non-issue. Can I just say, wrong. Age does not fix this, and marriage does not fix this. Now, this is not an easy teaching for the vast majority of us in any season. In fact, it's so difficult that we are tempted, I think, to just dismiss it. And what we can start to do is go, okay, yeah, that's nice, Jesus. Like, I'm on board with the idea of lusting after no one other than my spouse. Like, that's great in theory. I'm on board with that. I really am. And with you, Jesus, being the Son of God and all, you were probably able to do this. But I'm like a normal person with normal appetites and normal hormones, and I live in the real world, Jesus, with like really attractive people around me all the time. And so I just don't think this is possible. And many people hear these words and come away feeling guilty or feeling defeated. Like, man, I really do want to find victory over this, but I don't know how. Jesus is about to show us how we overcome behavior patterns. He's about to show us how we overcome thought patterns. Jesus is about to give us like the real key to actual change, like thinking and behavior change. Like, how do you actually become stronger from the inside out? And here's what Jesus knows. Jesus knows that willpower will only get you so far. Jesus knows that wanting to live differently is not enough. Even really wanting to live differently is not enough. Willpower is fantastic as long as it works. And so if it works, use it. But sometimes your thought and behavior patterns are too strong. Imagine going to a counselor. Imagine sitting down with a counselor to overcome a problem. And the counselor just says to you, well, what you need to do is use more willpower. Would you pay good money for that? Okay, I want to show you guys a clip from a very popular but very old show, and I am dating myself with this one. This is a clip from the old show called Bob Newhart. Do any of you guys remember this show? Do you remember watching it at all? I am dating myself. Okay, Bob Newhart played this like very soft-spoken and hilarious psychologist, and he was also a stand-up comedian doing other stuff. But I want to show you about a 6-minute clip of counseling gone bad, counseling gone very wrong, and it makes me feel so much better about myself as a counselor. This is amazing. So here we go. This is Bob Newhart, the psychologist.
Dr. Switzer?
Yes, come in. I'm just washing my hands.
I'm Catherine Bigman. Janet Carlisle referred me.
Oh, yes. Still being buried alive in a box.
Yes, that's me. Should I lay down?
Oh, no, we don't do that anymore. Just have a seat. And let me tell you a bit about our billing. I charge $5 for the first 5 minutes. And then absolutely nothing after that. How does that sound?
That sounds great. Too good to be true, as a matter of fact.
Well, I can almost guarantee you that our session won't last the full 5 minutes. Now, we don't do any insurance billing, so you would either have to pay in cash or by check.
Wow, okay.
And I don't make change.
All right.
And go.
Go.
Well, tell
What?
me about the problem that you wish to address.
Oh, okay. Well, I have this fear of being buried alive in a box. I start thinking about being buried alive, and I begin to panic.
Has anyone ever tried to bury you alive in a box?
No, but truly thinking about it does make my life horrible. I mean, I can't go through tunnels or be in an elevator or in a house, anything boxy.
So what you're saying is you're claustrophobic.
Yes, that's it.
All right, well, let's go, Catherine. I'm going to say 2 words to you right now. I want you to listen to them very, very carefully. Then I want you to take them out of the office with you and incorporate them into your life.
Well, shall I write them down?
Well, if it makes you comfortable, it's just 2 words. We find most people can remember them.
Okay.
You ready?
Yes.
Okay, here they are. Stop it!
I'm sorry?
Stop it!
Stop it?
Yes, S-T-O-P, new word, I-T.
So, what are you saying?
You know, it's funny. I say 2 simple words, and I cannot tell you the amount of people who say exactly the same thing you're saying. I mean, this is not Yiddish, Catherine. This is English. Stop it.
So, I should just stop it.
There you go. I mean, you don't want to go through life being scared of being buried alive in a box, do you? I mean, that sounds frightening.
It is.
Then stop it.
I can't. I mean, it's been with me since childhood.
No, we don't go there. Just stop it.
So, I should just stop being afraid of being buried alive in a box.
You got it. Good go. Well, it's only been 3 minutes, so that will be $3.
Actually, I only have a 5, so
Well, I don't make change.
then I guess I'll take the full 5 minutes.
Fine. All right. Well, what other problems would you like to address?
I'm bulimic. I stick my fingers down my throat.
Stop it! What are you, nut of some kind? Don't do that.
But I'm compelled to. My mom used to call me fatty.
No, we don't go there.
But I've been having this dream.
No, we don't go there either.
But my horoscope did say...
We definitely don't go there. Just stop it. What else?
Well, I have self-destructive relationships with men.
Stop it! You want to be with a man, don't you?
Yes.
Well, then stop it. Don't be such a big baby.
I wash my hands a lot.
That's all right.
It is?
I wash my hands all the time. There's a lot of germs out there. Yeah, don't worry about that one.
I'm afraid to drive.
Well, stop it! How are you going to get around? Get in the car and drive, you kook. Stop it!
You stop it! You stop it!
What's the problem, Catherine?
I don't like this. I don't like this therapy at all. You're just telling me to stop it.
And you don't like that.
No, I don't.
So you think we're moving too fast? Is that it?
Yes. Yes, I do.
All right, then let me give you 10 words that I think will clear everything up for you. You want to get a pad and a pencil for this one?
All right.
Are you ready? All right, here are the 10 words. Stop it or I'll bury you alive in a box!
You're counting the words. That's awesome. You know what? That makes me feel so much more competent as a counselor. So often we hear Jesus' words about lust in Matthew 5. And what we really hear him saying is, stop it. But Jesus knows that we need more than that. He's smart, he's realistic, and he understands. Like if you have a firmly entrenched pattern of thinking or a behavior, you need more than someone coming along and saying, stop it. And that's why I think what he says next is brilliant. Here's what he says. He says, if your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to go into hell. Now, if you are new to the Bible, And you're like, wait, what? Right? Like, what? Yeah, I mean, this is it makes so much sense. So for prayer time after the message, a few of us in the room today will gather and we have a knife and some anesthesia and some antibacterial solution. And Rebecca works at a dentist office, and so she knows a lot of stuff. And so she's going to offer some voluntary surgery. Because at Brookview, we take Jesus seriously. Now, like, obviously, okay, Jesus is not teaching self-mutilation to curb sexual issues. If he was, think about it, he probably missed the most obvious part of the body to cut off. Jesus gives us a dramatic metaphor here to arrest our attention. So what is he saying? He's saying when you have destructive thought or behavior patterns and you can't shake them, and this would be true for lust, it would be true for misplaced sexual desire, it would be true for any other destructive pattern. He's saying you need you need more than someone to come along and say, stop it. He's saying you might need to sacrifice some things. You might need to cut some things out. To get on the other side of entrenched patterns, you may need to sacrifice some freedom. You may need to sacrifice time. You may need to sacrifice money. You may need help. You may need to sacrifice your dignity. You may need to tell somebody that you've got this issue and have them come alongside of you so that you can get help. We faced kind of a dilemma in our house several years ago when Cameron, our son, who's now 19, was 6 or so. Cameron liked cookies and candy a lot. And I know that this is appalling, but when we weren't looking, sometimes he would eat them without permission. So we'd find wrappers or crumbs or whatever around, and it got serious enough that we decided we needed to have an intervention. And Jen was like brilliant. She was like, Cam, you like cookies and candy, and we get that, but there's a limit to how much you should eat, and there's a right time for it. And you seem to be having trouble. And Cam said, so Jen said, well, sweetheart, when you sneak stuff, how does it make you feel? And Cam said, well, it makes me feel ashamed and afraid. I have to worry that I'm going to get caught. And Jen said, well, do you like living like that? And he said, well, we don't like that you're living like that either, and we want you to have cookies. Sweetheart, understand, we want you to have cookies, we really do, but you need to have the right amount at the right time. So this sneaking thing just isn't good for your heart. So Jen says, what do we need to do? I mean, we'll do anything to help you with this. What do we need to do? Not have any sweets in the house? And Cam said, I don't like that idea. So Jen said, okay, honey, what can we do to help you with this? And this 6-year-old boy said, and I found this impressively insightful. He said, well, it'd be helpful if they weren't on the counter. Because when I see them all the time, I start thinking about them. So could you put them where I can't see them? And then because I know where they are in the cupboard, and sometimes I'll be tempted to go in and get one, could you put a little note on them that says, Cam, this is not a good idea. It's not worth it. Mom. So you guys, we did that. We did that, and then we each grabbed a little hand and we prayed with him for strength, and he made a decision that day to step into the process of resisting his desires. And for him, it was the beginning of freedom. Eventually, he was able to get beyond, see the cookie, want the cookie, eat the cookie. But in order to get there, some stuff had to happen. He had to confess, he had to admit weakness, he had to ask for help, and we needed to set boundaries. This is a little bit closer to what I think Jesus is getting at. Blindness was never really the goal, but boundaries are. Accountability is. Talking to other people about our struggles is. Confession with people that truly love you is is powerful. If your eye causes you to stumble, poke it out. If your hand causes you to stumble, cut it off. Jesus is saying to break destructive habits and behaviors, like get extreme if you need to. Get extreme if you need to, because it's worth it. And I want to pause here and say, and I want to get real serious for a second. Like, this might be a huge wake-up call for some of you about something. Because maybe you've got something going on and you feel like little 6-year-old Cameron. You feel guilty, you feel afraid, you feel ashamed, and honestly, you don't think you could ever stop. Now, in clear moments, you really want to, but can you? And here's what I'll say. Guys, I will say this. I have seen people break free from crazy stuff. But rarely have I seen that happen because somebody came along and said to them, stop it. They organized their entire lives around beginning to live and think differently. Alcoholics have done this. Drug addicts have done this. Gambling addicts have done this. Shopping addicts have done this. Sexual addicts have done this. And porn addicts have done this. This is a wake-up call, because if this is you, if this really is you, then you need to know God wants something better for you. And he will walk with you into freedom and into wholeness. But you have to be willing to get radical. You probably need to confess and get a support system. You may need to restrict some freedom in order to find some freedom. You may need a support group or a counselor. You might need to sacrifice time. You might need to sacrifice money. You may need to cut off your hand or poke out your eye. The point is, it might cost you something very real to find freedom. And at this point, I was tempted to dive in and give you guys all sorts of resources that are available for a whole litany of issues that people have, sexual or otherwise. But I'm not going to do that. And here's why I'm not going to do that. Because here's what I know. You guys are smart. You're smart and you're resourceful and you have Google. And you can do some research and you can get what you need. There are resources aplenty for all of these things if you're willing to get radical. So get resourceful. You might need a support group, or you might need a counselor to break free. And some of you are like, yeah, but counseling is expensive and it's time consuming. Yeah, you know what? It might not be covered by your insurance. So are you willing to make a major sacrifice for this? Are you willing to actually get extreme about this? Because if willpower isn't working, then what's next for you? And I can't tell you, because it really depends on you. It depends on your situation. It depends on your specific struggle. But I will tell you this. You do not want to spend the rest of your life living in shame and fear and guilt. Now, the world has a solution for all of that. The world says, here's how you solve the problem. It's that you buy this line of thinking. Hey, whatever you want to do, it's all okay. Whatever you want to do, it's all okay. That's how you let go of fear and shame and guilt and all of that, because anything goes. But maybe you know better. Maybe you really do know better. So what are you going to do? You guys, God's plan is to create a new humanity where men and women with transformed hearts live together in Christ in such a way that they honor the image of God in one another. They learn to treat each other like brothers and sisters. That's all we are. We're a family, and God is our Father, and we treat each other like brothers and sisters because God's ultimate dream is for us to get sexuality right. Now, in recognizing that none of us have it right, not me, not you, not anybody, not perfectly, then how do we, as broken people, move toward wholeness? Well, it has to start by embracing God's dream for sexuality. It starts by coming to a point where we say, I actually do want to be free from all the junk. So God, show me what sexuality is meant to be and teach me what this looks like and how to begin to live into it. Because I want to get started on this, and God, I want to get started on this right now. God is wanting to start something new in you and in me. He's wanting to create an entirely new kind of community. And that community will be made up of all sorts of broken people that are broken in all kinds of ways. So no matter your past or even your present situation, God is inviting you into something new and something better with him. Because of Jesus, see, this is now possible for ordinary broken people. If you remember back to the beginning of this series, Jesus began by saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are the meek. Blessed are those who don't look strong and spiritual." Blessed now are not just the winners that society says are blessed. Jesus says, no, blessed are the wrinkled. Blessed are the misshapen. Blessed are those who never got asked to the prom, never got asked to the dance. Blessed are the single. Blessed are the married. Blessed are the prostitutes. Blessed are the addicted. Blessed are the regretful. Blessed are those with all kinds of sexual brokenness in their lives. Blessed are you who have been shamed. And he would go on and on. Blessed, blessed, blessed. We've all had issues with mismanaged sexuality, every single one of us. And some of you are filled with so much shame in this arena. And so here's what I'll say. I wish I had words tender enough. I wish I could get my voice tender enough to say this. Remember that there is absolutely no hurt that God cannot heal. And there is no sin that he cannot forgive. There is no hurt that God cannot heal, and there is no sin that he cannot forgive. You may have suffered horrible betrayal or abuse or pain. There's a God who specializes in wiping away every tear. There's a loving God, and healing is what he does. It is his business. So maybe you've made some horrible choices. Maybe you've violated some promises, betrayed your deepest values. I just want to say, and this is what Jesus would say, blessed are you. Blessed are you, because the kingdom of God has now invaded earth in Jesus. And so healing and wholeness are now available to anyone at all, in the midst of anything at all. Jesus insisted the kingdom of heaven is now at hand. The kingdom of heaven has now come near. Life together with God, in God's favor, in God's presence, that life has now become available on earth to ordinary people. The realm where things are as God wants them to be is now here and available. It's now among you. It's all around you, and it's available to you, and you may enter into it anytime you wish. Anytime you wish. Jesus came to lead us into something beautiful because he's for us. He is 100% for us. And that leads me to the last couple of verses of this passage. These words have been so misunderstood, and they have been so badly misapplied. Jesus continues. We're almost to the finish line. Jesus continues. He says, "It has been said," which means, again, he's about to quote something. "It has been said, anyone who divorces his wife must give her a certificate of divorce." Now, I'm guessing that most of you don't recognize that quote. It's from what to you and me is really an obscure line in Deuteronomy 24:1. You guys all know 24:1, right? We have to remember, okay, here's what we have to remember. Jesus wasn't teaching us at Brookview in our situation and in our culture. Jesus was teaching other people in a very different culture, and he was teaching people who lived in an oral culture. They didn't have access to writings, like even the scriptures. Like a whole village might have only one copy of the scriptures, and that copy would be housed at the local synagogue. So rather than doing a lot of reading, they memorized obscene amounts of writing, obscene amounts. Okay, so for this Jewish audience, most of them would have the Torah, the entire Torah, the first 5 books of the Old Testament, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Most of the crowd would have already had that memorized. Now just think about that. Is our church, like in our church, is it that way? No, I mean in our church, I'm the only one that has the entire Torah memorized. Okay, but in Jesus' day, it would have been most of the crowd, And so the beauty is that a rabbi like Jesus would come along and he would quote one line and everybody would call to mind the entire thing. So Jesus quotes a line from Deuteronomy 24, and let me give you the whole thing. Here's the rest of the passage that surrounds what Jesus quotes. It says, if a man marries a woman who becomes displeasing to him, think about that language. What does that even mean? If a man marries a woman who becomes displeasing to him because he finds something indecent about her. Again, what does that mean? And he writes her a certificate of divorce, gives it to her, and sends her from his house. And if after she leaves his house, she becomes the wife of another man, and here's where it gets very hypothetical, and her second husband dislikes her and writes her a certificate of divorce, gives it to her, and sends her from his house, or if he dies, then her first husband who divorced her, you guys are all following this, then her first husband who divorced her is not allowed to marry again after she has been defiled. That would be detestable in the eyes of the Lord. Do not bring sin upon the land the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance. So that's in the Bible. And actually, we can't dive fully into this, but here's what I'll tell you guys. What's happening here in this passage is actually beautiful. It's beautiful. This is ancient Jewish case law, and to differentiate, it's ancient Jewish case law. It's not a command for all people in all times, in all places. It's ancient Jewish case law intended to protect women. It was intended to protect women, and it was way, way, way ahead of its time. It's not about when divorce is okay or not, or God's heart on divorce. It's about the aftermath of divorce and how to mitigate its devastating effects on women in ancient society. So here's what you and I need to take away from this. The purpose of this law was to guard against the oppression of women. It was to guard. Moses is saying, okay, if you're just going to cast aside your wife, you at least need to give her a document that says she's free to marry another. And this was a big deal for women in the ancient Near East, because here's how it worked in almost all other ancient Near Eastern societies. If a man cast aside his wife, he was allowed by law to reclaim her for up to 5 years. It was as if she was property and he could just reclaim her. Well, that meant then that no other man would come along and be willing to marry her, and that would leave her unbelievably vulnerable and defenseless. So Moses says, guys, that is not okay. Otherwise, she'll end up on the street or in prostitution or whatever. Now, by Jesus' day, there was a raging debate going on over the phrase, something indecent. Huge debate in their culture going on over the phrase, something indecent. What did Moses mean by that? Well, most rabbis through the centuries interpreted that to mean adultery. So if your wife has had an affair, here's how you go about divorcing her. But even so, you make sure that she's not left vulnerable and oppressed. But a generation before Jesus, there was a rock star rabbi that came along by the name of Hillel. And he said, no, that's actually not what something indecent means. It means that she displeases you for any reason at all. Okay, if a man marries a woman who becomes displeasing to him because he finds something indecent about her, So Hillel says, according to Rabbi Hillel, a man can divorce his wife for any reason at all. Like you don't like her cooking, she's out. You don't like the way that she looks, a few wrinkles, puts on a few pounds, she's out. Anything that you find indecent or unpleasing is grounds for divorce. Now, this view exploded on the scene about a generation before Jesus. So by Jesus' day, because of a misreading of Deuteronomy 24, only men could divorce women, which is not what Moses said, but that became a thing. And a man could cast aside his wife for any reason at all. He could just throw her out on the street. Now, Jesus was not down with that, as you can imagine. So in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus weighs in on this debate. He gives his thoughts on the phrase, something indecent. And he says, but I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife, except for sexual immorality, makes her the victim of adultery, and anyone who marries a divorced woman commits adultery. He's saying, listen, I know the popular interpretation of something indecent in Deuteronomy 24 is that of Rabbi Hillel. You can divorce your wife for any and every reason. But I'm here to tell you that the rabbis that came before Hillel had it right. The right way to interpret something indecent is adultery. Now, people reading this passage, and it raises all sorts of questions about divorce, right? In our culture, we read this passage, and it raises all kinds of questions about divorce and about remarriage, because taken at face value, here's what it sounds like. It sounds like Jesus is saying you can only ever get divorced if your spouse has an affair. And even then, all remarriage is adultery and off the table. And that's a really tough pill to swallow. So people start asking questions like, well, what about abuse? What about physical or sexual or emotional or verbal? What do you do about any of that stuff? What about desertion or abandonment if they walk away from you and can't you get a divorce in some of those more extreme scenarios? But here's what we have to understand. In Matthew chapter 5, Jesus is not giving an in-depth teaching on marriage and divorce and remarriage. If we think he's answering the questions, when is it okay as a follower of Jesus to get divorced? And then under what circumstances could I get remarried? Then his answer is loaded with all kinds of challenges. But that's not what's going on here. Here's what's going on. Jesus is weighing in on a raging debate in his day. It's a debate on how to interpret Deuteronomy 24, and he's saying Hillel's interpretation is way off. It doesn't mean for any reason, it means for adultery. Now, why was this such an issue for Jesus? Why even bring it up? Because it was blowing up families left and right, and it was leading to all kinds of oppression for women. So what is Jesus doing here? Jesus is dealing with the oppression of women. In his day, the religious leaders had missed the heart of Deuteronomy 24, and what was intended by Moses to protect women was instead being used to objectify and oppress them. So what can we take away from what Jesus says here? We can take away this. Jesus loves people. Jesus loves people. And he especially loves the vulnerable and the broken. And he wants those that are strong to protect the weak. But I would say this. Is that not, after spending 12 weeks on this, is that not what the entire Sermon on the Mount is about? That's what the whole thing is about. Love your enemies. Let go of anger. Let go of hate. Learn to love people that don't always love you. Don't judge people unfairly and don't do it eagerly. Do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. Judge unto others as you would have them judge unto you. The Sermon on the Mount is all about human flourishing. It's about Jesus' vision. And I'll tell you what, the more I understand it, the more I dig into it and spend time reflecting on it, the more captivated I am by it. It is beautiful to me. My faithfulness, really, I've seen over the years as a follower of Jesus, my faithfulness often comes down to this. Do I truly trust that Jesus is for me? That his way of life and the invitation into his vision for living is the best? Do I truly trust that Jesus is for me? Do I really believe that Jesus knew what he was talking about? But even more, do I really trust that he is for me? I do. I really, really do believe that. Do you? What if Jesus is inviting you into something amazing? And what if he's patient and he's gracious and kind and he wants to walk with you all along the way as you stumble and make mistakes? What if that's who Jesus is? What if he's inviting you into something extraordinary? What if Jesus really is 100% for you?